My name's Clara Hayes, 31, and I used to believe good work always gets noticed. I was an accountant, the quiet kind, the one who color codes spreadsheets, triple checks numbers, and stays late without being asked. I didn't drink, didn't gossip, didn't play office politics. And that was my biggest mistake, because people like me make the perfect scapegoat. My boss, Daniel Cross, was the golden boy of our firm. Sharp suits, sharper lies. He loved taking credit and dodging blame. When a $200,000 gap appeared in the company's financials, he didn't panic. He smiled, because he already knew who'd take the fall, me. One Friday afternoon, he called me into his glass office. "Clara," he said, with fake sympathy dripping from his tone, "we found inconsistencies in your reports. You might want to get a lawyer." It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. I stammered, showing him emails, records, proofs. But he'd already rewritten the narrative. By Monday, I was escorted out by security, my badge deactivated, my name whispered like a curse through the hallways I'd once called home. He took everything, my job, my reputation, my peace, and the company didn't even investigate, because he'd framed the evidence too perfectly. For 2 years, I couldn't find work. Every background check, every interview, it all ended the same. "Sorry, Ms. Hayes, we've decided to move forward with another candidate." But then, I found out Daniel had launched his own company, and that was the moment something inside me snapped. Because I didn't want his money. I wanted his ruin. They gave me a verdict before anyone bothered to read my side. The lobby cameras played on loop in my head. Daniel smiling, HR folding brochures, the partner who used to nod at my reports now looking away when I passed. I let the shame sit with me for a few nights, like a bruise that needed to be acknowledged. And then I started to inventory what I still had. Skills, memory, a Rolodex full of quiet people who hated Daniel for reasons they'd never say in open office meetings. An accountant's intolerance for sloppy books, and a capacity for patient, methodical cruelty that matched the way he had taken my life apart. Slow, deliberate, with an audience. First, I rebuilt my name in small ways. I did freelance audits, cash-strapped nonprofits, a boutique law firm that appreciated someone who read footnotes. I worked for cash. I worked at night, and I didn't breathe a word of what I was planning. People thought I'd been broken. Instead, I was gathering resources, legal counsel on retainer, a burner phone, a secure email no one could tie to me, and a string of former colleagues who trusted me even after the scandal. Trust, it turned out, is a currency Daniel never learned to steward. 2 months after I was fired, Daniel incorporated his new venture, Crossbridge Holdings. He attracted seed funding from the same old networks, glossy cocktail receptions, LinkedIn posts with aspirational quotes, and an investor deck that promised disruptive middle-market solutions. I watched him on social media like a slow-moving infection. He posted photos with investors, selfies at conferences, quotes about resilience and new beginnings. He was trying to fix his reputation in public, while I was planning to dismantle it in private. I went back to the ledger. I started with things Daniel could never count on: ego and impatience. He'd always rushed approvals, trusted charm over diligence, and cut corners he assumed no one would notice. So I looked where corners are cut most often: vendor contracts, related party invoices, and the little memos partners bury in attachments. I didn't need a firewall bypass or a master key to get the information I wanted. I needed people. A temp bookkeeper at Crossbridge overheard complaining about missing invoices. I took her coffee and listened. A junior analyst Daniel brushed off. He'd kept a folder of internal memos that contradicted the public pitch. An ex-client who'd been overbilled. She mailed me a copy of her billing statement because Daniel's numbers had burned her business. Each small thing was a matchstick. I organized everything like an audit. Dates, amounts, counterparties, and the pattern of redirection. Little things added up. Invoices for consulting routed to shell entities. Vendor payments that lined Daniel's lifestyle more than any legitimate expense. And a pattern of revenue recognition that made their growth look like a house of cards. $48,000 here, $112,000 there, then $325,000 wired to a company with a mailbox in a strip mall. Nothing dramatic on its own. Only an accountant would see how those decimals spelled a story. I also fed on his arrogance. Daniel loved to brag about being untouchable. At a panel talk, he'd described regulatory audits as ritual inconveniences. I took that rhetoric and flipped it. If he wanted the spotlight, I'd drag the spotlight to the audit trail. My first public move had to be surgical, not sensational. I didn't want vindication so much as inevitability. The kind of knowledge that forces an investor to act because the alternative is their own ruin. So I wrote a single, precise, anonymous note to a regional investigative reporter I'd admired years ago. I attached a sampling. Not everything, just enough to open the door. An oddly large vendor payment, a copy of an internal memo instructing accelerated revenue recognition, and the contact details of a former vendor who'd been paid twice for the same deliverable. The reporter's reply was a slow burn. She asked for verification. I provided a ledger extract and a bank transaction summary, redacted. She started digging, quietly. A week later, there was a short online piece. Questions raised about Crossbridge's early accounting practices. It landed like a pebble. The pebble worked. Investors started asking for more documentation. Daniel called meetings and staged calm. He insisted everything was fine. He sent a glossy CFO memo promising transparency. He emailed partners with rationalizations. Investors, terrified of headlines, asked their legal teams for due diligence. Crossbridge's advisors requested financials and third-party confirmations. The things you never hand to a curious auditor if you've been cooking the books. Meanwhile, I kept building. A friendly chat with a disgruntled former vendor got me signed invoices that matched no work orders. A peaceful weekend at the courthouse, public records research, uncovered a web of shell corporations registered in Daniel's partner's name. I acquired a copy of a private loan agreement with an individual I'd once done a pro bono audit for. He'd never spoken of the loan, but when I found the bank transcript, the timing of payments lined up with the consulting fees on Crossbridge's books. I never hacked. I never blackmailed. I used the one weapon Daniel had thought he'd stripped me of: meticulous, boring competence. I made sure every pronouncement I sent to journalists, investors, and the occasional disgruntled vendor could be substantiated in a court of law. If he wanted to accuse me of bitterness, he would have to go through depositions and subpoenas. And under oath, facts matter more than his charm. Then, one late night, a breakthrough. The temp I'd bought coffee for texted me a photo, an internal PowerPoint, dated 6 months prior. That showed an explicit plan to hide liabilities in off-balance operational reserves. It was titled in Daniel's voice, Strategic Recognition and Capital Efficiency. He had not hidden his intent cleverly. He had just hidden it beneath corporate buzzwords. The file also included an email chain where Daniel directed a junior accountant to reclassify a $275,000 vendor expense as CapEx adjustment. The junior's reply read, "Done, as discussed." That single chain turned the audits from speculation into a paper trail of intent. I packaged it differently for different audiences. For the reporter, a human story with documents and a vendor willing to talk. For the angel investor, a succinct summary of misstatements and the specific related party risks. For the bank that serviced Crossbridge's line of credit, an anonymized alert that regulatory exposure might affect collateral. For myself, a quiet satisfaction that all the pieces were in play. The dominoes were set. The first investor called their counsel. The bank froze an interim line. Daniel panicked on the inside, but smiled for cameras on the outside. He flew to meet with partners. He held what looked like emergency board meetings. He tried to buy time the way men like him always try, with projections and presentations and the same old charisma. But numbers don't lie when you can show them the paper. And paper is the one thing Daniel never respected. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 2 years to the day since I walked out with a cardboard box of belongings, the local business reporter published the follow-up piece. The headline said it all. Crossbridge accounting under scrutiny. Investors demand answers. Daniel texted me a taunt that morning, thinking I'd be cowering. I didn't reply. I poured coffee, opened my Ledger app, and watched as someone else, ordinary people who demanded accountability, began to ask the right questions. Part 3 will be where the investors stop being cautious and start being brutal. 0. The story broke wider than I expected. That second article didn't just expose Crossbridge. It lit a fire under every investor, auditor, and regulator within a 100-mile radius. By noon, the phones in Daniel's glass office must have been ringing nonstop. By evening, the company's PR team had released a polished statement denying all wrongdoing, full of empty words like transparency, integrity, and misunderstandings. But words don't fix balance sheets, and investors don't forgive missing money. Within 48 hours, the first major partner, Blackfield Capital, announced they were suspending their funding pending an independent audit. That was the start of the landslide. See, Daniel built his empire on illusion. Numbers that looked clean but weren't. Charm that sounded confident but cracked under scrutiny. And I didn't need to push anymore. I just had to sit back and let the truth do its job. The whistleblower hotline at Crossbridge exploded with anonymous tips. Employees who'd been too scared to speak suddenly found their voices. Leaked emails surfaced online. Proof of double billing, tax manipulations, and fake vendor accounts. The same junior accountant who once replaced my name in the payroll system with terminated now sent those emails to the very journalist I'd helped months ago. The investigation snowballed into something bigger than revenge. It became exposure. When the auditors came knocking, Daniel tried to perform, smiling, shaking hands, pretending nothing was wrong. But the moment they asked for vendor ledgers, he cracked. His CFO resigned mid-meeting. 2 investors filed civil suits within a week, and Crossbridge's stock, once hailed as the future of data infrastructure, plummeted by 76% in a single quarter. Meanwhile, I watched it all unfold in silence. From my small apartment, the same place where I'd cried the night I was fired, I sat with a cup of coffee and read the headlines. Crossbridge CEO faces allegations of fraud. Anonymous source reveals internal cover-up. Former employees demand justice. Anonymous source. That was me, and no one ever knew. But justice, real justice, isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the look on a liar's face when the mask doesn't fit anymore. I wasn't looking for money. I wasn't looking for an apology. I just wanted truth to have its turn. And it did. Daniel's empire collapsed in 6 months. His investors pulled out. His assets froze, and the board he handpicked voted to remove him, effective immediately. His name, once polished gold in the industry, became a cautionary tale in every corporate seminar. The same people who once believed his every word now whispered his name like a warning. And me? I got an email one morning from that same journalist. Just one line. "You were right." I smiled. Not out of pride, but peace. Because revenge had never been about destruction. It was about balance. And finally, the numbers added up. 6 months after the fall of Crossbridge, life had gone quiet again. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear, but the kind that comes after a storm finally passes. I'd moved to a new city, Portland, taken a small but honest job at a financial consultancy. The pay was modest, the office was small, but it was peaceful, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to watch my back. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said to answer. "Lena?" That voice, I knew it instantly. Daniel Cross. Except this time, it wasn't polished or confident. It was cracked, hollow. "I hope you're happy," he said. "You ruined my life." I didn't say anything. I let the silence sit there between us. Because he wasn't wrong. I had ruined the life he built. But it wasn't the one he deserved. After a long pause, he said, "You think you won? You think they'll remember you?" And I said quietly, "No, Daniel. They'll remember what you did. That's enough." Then I hung up. And just like that, the last thread that tied me to him snapped. A few weeks later, I visited my old mentor, the only person who'd believed me when the accusations first hit. We sat by the window of a small cafe, sipping coffee like the world had come full circle. He smiled and said, "You know, you could have walked away." I looked out at the rain and replied, "I did. But first, I made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else." That night, as I walked home, I realized something. Revenge hadn't broken me. It had freed me. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or cops. Sometimes it comes from the same quiet accountant who refuses to stay invisible. I didn't destroy Daniel Cross out of hate. I did it out of love. For the truth, for the people he exploited, and for the version of me who once believed staying silent was the only option. Now, every time I open a spreadsheet or sign a new contract, I smile. Because behind every number, there's a story. In mine, it's no longer about survival. It's about control, the kind that no one can ever take again. In the end, I didn't steal his money. I stole his peace. And that, in its own quiet way, was the sweetest revenge of all.